Horns scream, a crowd gathers. Two sleek black SUVs grind to a halt under the hot glare of the Lagos sun. Beneath the concrete shadow of the underbridge, a thin woman sits on a torn mat, holding a faded plastic bowl. Her wrapper hangs loose on her bones. Her eyes are tired but kind. The kind that once watched over two boys every night. The rear door of the first SUV flies open. Two tall men in dark suits step down, the dust of the road kissing their polished shoes. Their faces strong, familiar, suddenly small with fear. "Mama?" the first one whispers. The woman looks up. Her hands tremble. She squints as if the sun is playing tricks on her. The second man drops to his knees, tears already shining. "Madam Amanda," he says, voice breaking. "It's us, Jacob and Joshua." The bowl slips from her fingers. Coins clatter on concrete like rain on iron roof. For a long second, the city noise fades. All that remains is the sound of breath, hers, thin and shaky. Theirs, fast and frightened. "Is it you?" she asks. "Yes, Mama." Jacob reaches for her hands. They are warm but weak. He feels the bones, the years, the hunger. "We found you." Her lips try to smile. Then her head tilts, her body sags. Too light, too quiet. "Mama!" Joshua shouts as they catch her. The crowd presses in. A danfo honks so loud the bridge shakes. "Make way!" Jacob calls, lifting her as if she weighs no more than a sack of bananas. "We're taking her to the hospital now." The door swings open. Tires squeal. The city roars back to life. Years earlier, the city had roared with a different sound, the kind that follows sad news on a small radio in a small village house. Jacob and Joshua were 10 when the voice on the radio said their parents' plane never reached home. Nothing made sense after that. Their uncle, Namdi, moved through the house like a storm, opening drawers, pointing, selling. He said it was his right. He said boys shouldn't argue with men. On a hot afternoon, with the sky white and hard, Namdi slammed the iron gate and told them to leave. Their father's photos lay face down in dust. Their mother's church dress flew from a nail like a flag. The twins stood outside the gate, with nothing but a nylon bag and each other's hands. That first night under the bridge tasted like smoke and old water. The ground was cold. The city hummed above their heads. Jacob pressed his lips together to hide his fear. Joshua counted passing buses to stop his tears. Morning came, smelling of petrol and frying akara. People walked past without seeing them. The world was a river, and they were two tiny leaves, trying not to sink. They learned the rules of hunger. They learned the sound a stomach makes when it has nothing to say. They learned to run when men shouted, and to sleep with one shoe on, so nobody could steal it. Some nights they prayed. Some nights they just looked at the moon and tried to remember their mother's voice. One afternoon, a woman walked by with a basket of bananas balanced high and sure. Her steps were gentle but strong. Her name was Amanda. People called her Madam Amanda because respect stayed close to her even when money did not. She had lost her husband Ifeanyi 2 years before. She had buried her only son, Francis, not long after. Some villagers had called her names. Some had whispered witch and crossed the road. But Amanda kept walking. She sold bananas. She prayed. She kept her heart soft even when life tried to harden it. The twins ran after her in the market, not to steal, but to beg for food. "Please, Auntie," Jacob said, voice shaky. "We just need to eat." She stopped. The basket rocked slightly on her head. She bent until her eyes were level with theirs. Dust rose around them like a small cloud. "What are your names?" she asked. "Jacob and Joshua," they said, almost together. "Where are your parents?" Jacob's mouth opened, then closed. Joshua's eyes filled. The words came out in pieces. The plane, the uncle, the gate, the bridge. As they spoke, something inside Amanda broke and mended at the same time. Tears rolled down her cheeks, clean tracks on a face used to wind and sun. "Come," she said at last, voice soft but steady. "If God leaves me with only one room and a basket of bananas, I will still share them." She took them home to her small mud house at the edge of the village. She cooked. She watched them eat like boys who were afraid the food would run away. She found old shirts that smelled of clean soap and a blanket that still remembered warmth. That night, she covered them and stood at the doorway, hands folded, whispering a prayer. In the morning, she made a rule. No stealing, no lying. School comes first. My house is small, but my heart is big. You are my sons now. It was not easy. The roof leaked. The landlord knocked. The basket felt heavier each week. People still whispered. But the twins woke early, swept the floor, helped peel bananas, and ran to school with exercise books hugged to their chests. They studied under mango trees when the classroom was full. They asked questions until the chalk ran out. Teachers saw fire in their eyes and fed it with more lessons. When exam results came, their names were at the top. An NGO visited the school that same week, asking for students who were brilliant and brave. The twins took the tests with hands that shook. When the SUV rolled into the village to collect the scholars, dust rose high and everyone came out. Amanda stood in front of the mud house in her best wrapper, the one she kept for church and good news. She hugged her boys, kissing their foreheads, smiling with all her teeth because she had promised herself she would not cry. But when they climbed into the car, the smile turned to rain. She waved and waved until the car was a small dark dot, and the road swallowed it. She kept waving long after it was gone. The years turned like pages. Rent climbed. The landlord's voice grew hard. Banana sales dropped when sickness pinned Amanda to her bed. Friends were kind until the money ended. Then came a day when her keys felt heavy and useless. The landlord stood by the door with men who did not smile. The mud house became someone else's story. Amanda carried her wrapper, her Bible, and a bowl. The bridge remembered her. At night, when the city slept with one eye open, she dreamed of two boys in clean shirts, laughing as they ran to school. In the morning, she prayed, "God, let me see what they became before I close my eyes." It sown the time. In Wericon, far away, across oceans, two young men in grey lecture halls listened to the hum of computers. Jacob and Joshua studied like the future was sitting in the front row. They built code that danced. They joined teams that solved problems bigger than maps. When they graduated, the best tech companies opened their doors wide. Their names climbed email chains. Their work led projects that changed how people lived and worked. Money came first like rain, then like a river. But money could not buy a voice they longed to hear. Every holiday they tried to call. Numbers failed. Letters returned. The village address blurred with time. 8 years after they left, they stood in an airport with 2 passports and one promise. "We go home," Jacob said. "And we find her," Joshua answered. They drove straight to the village. The dusty compound watched as the SUVs rolled in, curious eyes following. People blinked as if a story had stepped out of a book. Little Jacob and Joshua, these tall men, these suits, "We are looking for Madame Amanda," they said. Faces fell. Neighbors looked at the ground. "She left," one woman whispered. "The landlord drove her out. We don't know where she went." The twins stood very still. The world felt too loud. They thanked the woman, got back into the car, and prayed without moving their lips. On the way back to Lagos, under the hard noon sun, they saw her just a shape at first, a hand holding a bowl, a wrapper with a small tear near the hem. The driver was already past when something pulled at Jacob's chest like a rope. "Stop," he said. "Reverse," Joshua added, voice tight. The SUVs rolled back under the bridge. Dust curled. Brakes sighed. The twins stepped down and time folded. The woman lifted her face. Years fell away. "Mama?" Jacob whispered. Her eyes filled. "Is it you, Jacob? Joshua?" She tried to stand. The world tilted. Her knees buckled. "Mama!" Joshua caught her, but her head fell back, her breath a thin string. A bus horn roared, a crowd closed in, and the bowl spun in a small circle on the ground. "Drive!" Jacob shouted, cradling her against his chest as if he could hold her life in place. The door slammed. Tires screamed. The hospital gates rushed toward them, and Madame Amanda's eyelids fluttered once, then stilled. The ambulance siren wailed as Jacob and Joshua leaned over Madame Amanda, their hands gripping hers tightly as though their touch alone could keep her alive. She lay still, her breathing shallow, her eyelids fluttering weakly. Her once strong body, the same body that had carried baskets of bananas and bent low to comfort 2 abandoned boys, now looked frail like a shadow of the woman they knew. At Lagos University Teaching Hospital, the medical team rushed her onto a stretcher. Nurses in white uniforms pushed her through the swinging glass doors. Jacob followed close, not caring that his suit jacket brushed the hospital walls. Joshua trailed behind, wiping his face with the back of his hand, his chest heaving. "Doctor, please!" Jacob's voice cracked. "She's our mother. Save her." The doctor, a tall man with tired eyes but steady hands, gave a sharp nod. "We will do everything we can. Wait outside." Those words, "wait outside," felt like punishment. For years, waiting had been their life. Waiting for food, waiting for help, waiting for God to answer prayers. Now, waiting meant watching the one person who never gave up on them slip into silence. They sat in the corridor, heads bent, their hands pressed together, as if in prayer. People walked past, patients on wheelchairs, nurses carrying files, relatives whispering, but to the twins, the hospital felt frozen. Minutes turned to an hour, and the door finally opened. The doctor stepped out, adjusting his stethoscope. His face softened. "She will live," he said gently. "But she is very weak. Malnutrition, stress, years without proper care. She needs rest, food and love. She needs her family." Jacob exhaled loudly and gripped Joshua's shoulder. They both felt the weight of those words. She needs her family. She had been their family when they had none. Now it was their turn. The next morning, Amanda woke slowly, her eyes heavy but clearer than before. Jacob was seated by her bed, his head bowed, while Joshua held her hand, watching every breath she took. When her eyes opened, tears rolled down their faces like children again. "Mama," Joshua whispered, brushing her cheek gently. Amanda blinked, then smiled weakly. "I thought I would never see you again." Her voice cracked, but the joy in it was stronger than the weakness. Jacob bent forward and kissed her hand. "We searched, Mama. For years we searched. We came back because of you." Her lips trembled. "I prayed every night. I told God, if I can just see what they have become, I will rest. And now, here you are. My boys. My sons." Joshua shook his head firmly. "No, Mama. You will not rest yet. You will live. You will eat. You will smile. You will see grandchildren." Amanda chuckled softly, though her eyes filled with tears. "Grandchildren? Ah, God is too kind." The twins looked at each other and, for a moment, they remembered the first day she took them in the small mud house, the single lantern, her hands breaking bread into two, giving them both halves while she went to bed hungry. That woman, the one the villagers had mocked, the one who had nothing yet gave everything, was the reason they were alive. 2 days later, the hospital discharged her. But Jacob and Joshua had already made plans. A convoy of SUVs waited outside the hospital gate. Neighbors who had once gossiped about Madame Amanda now stood speechless as they watched her step into the back seat with the twins at her side. Dust rose behind the cars as they sped off, not to the mud house she once called home, but to Lekki. When they pulled up to a gleaming white mansion with glass windows, fountains and palm trees lining the drive, Amanda gasped. Her hands trembled. This cannot be for me." Jacob placed his arm around her. "It is, Mama. This is your home now." She shook her head, her eyes wide. "A woman who sold bananas? A widow people called witch? Living here?" Joshua kissed her forehead. "No, Mama. A mother who raised kings. That is who is living here." Amanda broke down in tears, her knees weakening as she stepped through the golden doors. For the first time in years, her tears were not of pain, but of joy. And in that moment, she knew. The little boys she once rescued under the bridge had returned not just to save her, but to rewrite her story forever. But Amanda had no idea that even greater surprises were still to come. The Lekki mansion glowed at night, its wide halls filled with the sound of laughter. For the first time in many years, Madame Amanda sat at a table where food overflowed. Plates of rice, bowls of soup, fruits she once only sold at the market, all laid before her. But what made her smile most was not the meal. It was Jacob and Joshua, sitting across from her, dressed simply despite their wealth, their eyes still carrying the same warmth of the little boys she had taken in years ago. "Mama," Jacob said, setting down his fork, "we want to tell you everything. The world thinks we are just billionaires, but you deserve to know how it happened." Amanda leaned forward, her wrapper tied neatly, her eyes full of pride. "Tell me, my sons," Joshua began. "When we left Nigeria with that NGO, we were scared. We didn't know what was waiting for us abroad. But we remembered your words, Mama. Don't waste knowledge. Work hard. Let your success shame those who mocked you. Those words followed us everywhere. Jacob continued, his voice steady. At university, we studied software engineering. We stayed up at night, writing codes, while others slept. We built small apps at first to solve campus problems, then bigger ones. People noticed. Professors introduced us to companies. Soon, we were part of projects that changed lives. Joshua smiled faintly. Some of those projects made us rich overnight. But we didn't spend recklessly. We saved, we invested. And when the world thought we would stay in America, we said no. We remembered you. We remembered the mud house. We remembered Nigeria. Jacob's voice grew firmer. So we returned and built J-Tech, a company that creates software for hospitals, schools, and banks. Now, Mama, J-Tech is not only the biggest tech company in Nigeria, it is one of the fastest growing in Africa. Amanda gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hands. My sons, my Jacob, my Joshua, the same boys who once begged for food. Joshua reached for her hand. No, Mama, the boys who once had you. Without you, there would be no J-Tech. You planted the seed. Amanda broke into tears. She leaned over the table and pulled them close. I am proud. Even if I die tomorrow, I am proud. But the twins shook their heads together. You will not die tomorrow. You will live to see more. In the following months, the world began to notice J-Tech. The newspapers called Jacob and Joshua the Billionaire twins. Headlines carried their faces. TV stations invited them for interviews, and young Nigerians called them role models. At a massive tech conference in Lagos, Jacob stood on stage, speaking about innovation. Thousands of people clapped, foreign investors nodded in approval, and students screamed their names. Joshua unveiled a new app that connected hospitals in rural areas to city specialists, saving lives with a tap on a phone. But backstage, as the lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed, Amanda whispered something to them. My sons, this is good, but something is missing. They looked at her, puzzled. You have money, you have fame, but I want grandchildren. Her eyes sparkled through her tears. I want to carry babies again before I leave this world. Jacob laughed nervously. Joshua coughed. Mama, we are busy. No, she interrupted. God gave me a second chance with you. Don't wait too long. Our house is empty without the sound of children. Her words stayed with them. At first, they brushed it aside. But destiny had its own plan. Weeks later, during another tech exhibition in Lagos, Jacob met Juliet, a brilliant back-end developer with quick wit and a warm smile. Joshua, on the other hand, met Cynthia, another developer whose intelligence matched his own. What began as professional respect soon turned into something deeper. Late-night project meetings became dinners. Friendly conversations became long walks. Before long, love found its way into the lives of the Billionaire twins. And for Madame Amanda, the joy she had prayed for was only just beginning, though none of them knew that her time with them was running shorter than they imagined. The Lekki mansion buzzed with excitement. For the first time since she had moved in, Madame Amanda's face glowed with a kind of joy that made her look younger than her years. The twins had finally brought the news she had been waiting for. They were getting married. Juliet and Cynthia, the women who had captured Jacob and Joshua's hearts, were not just beautiful. They were brilliant minds who had stood beside the twins in building J-Tech's strongest projects. To Amanda, they were answers to her prayers. She embraced them warmly the first time they visited, her eyes wet with tears. You are welcome, my daughters, she said, holding their hands tight. You don't know how much this means to me. The weddings were planned with a touch of grandeur that Lagos had never seen before. Invitations spread like wildfire, and dignitaries, celebrities, and even government officials wanted to be part of the celebrations. The media called it the double wedding of the Billionaire twins. On the morning of the wedding, the compound was alive. White canopies stretched across the lawn, decorated with gold ribbons and fresh roses. Cars filled the streets, and guests dressed in colorful lace and agbada spilled out in excitement. Cameramen hurried to capture every moment. Inside, Madame Amanda sat in her finest wrapper, her head tie tied neatly. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman she saw. Once, she was a widow mocked in the market, forced to sell bananas to survive. Once, she was called a witch. Now, she was mother to billionaires, and about to lead them down the aisle. When the music started, Jacob and Joshua appeared in matching white tuxedos embroidered with gold, their faces shining with emotion. The crowd erupted in cheers. Juliet followed, dressed in a flowing gown that shimmered under the lights, her veil trailing like morning mist. Beside her, Cynthia walked with quiet grace, her eyes fixed on Joshua, her smile unshaken. The guests gasped at the sight, but what silenced them was the moment Amanda stood. Slowly, with trembling hands, she took her place between the two brides. The music softened as she reached for Jacob and Joshua, each arm linked with a son. The hall filled with a hush as she whispered, "My sons, this is my greatest dream." With tears streaming down her face, she led them forward. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, and dancing. The church echoed with songs of thanksgiving as vows were exchanged. By the time Juliet and Cynthia said, "I do," Amanda could hardly see through her tears. She leaned back in her seat, her heart swelling with pride. "God has done it," she murmured. The celebrations lasted until late night. Dancers filled the floor, music pounded through speakers, and laughter shook the walls. Madame Amanda sat at the high table, her grandchildren-to-be sitting close beside her. Every so often, she turned to look at Jacob and Joshua dancing with their wives, and she smiled. Neighbors from the village who had once gossiped about her were there too, watching in awe. "Is this not the same Amanda they called a witch?" one whispered. "Look at her now." But Amanda was not listening. Her heart was too full. Months later, her joy doubled. Juliet gave birth to a baby girl, her cheeks round and soft, her cry sharp as a bell. A week later, Cynthia delivered a healthy baby boy. The mansion filled with songs once again. Amanda held both babies in her arms, tears rolling freely. "This," she whispered, "is my answered prayer." Jacob and Joshua stood beside her, smiling. "Mama," they said together, "you will raise them just as you raised us." But none of them knew that Amanda's greatest joy would soon collide with her final goodbye. The Lecky mansion had never been livelier. Laughter echoed through the wide halls, bouncing off the marble floors and glass windows. Juliet and Cynthia had returned from the hospital, and in their arms were the new treasures of the family, Amanda's grandchildren. Amanda cradled the babies like fragile jewels, rocking them gently while tears slipped down her cheeks. The soft cry of the baby boy blended with the cooing of the baby girl, and she whispered prayers over them, her cracked voice trembling with joy. "My Father in heaven," she said softly, "you have answered me. You gave me sons when I was alone. And now, you've given me grandchildren. What else can a woman ask for?" Jacob knelt by her side, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Mama, you will not just ask, you will live to see them grow. You will tell them stories. You will teach them the same way you taught us." Joshua nodded quickly. "Yes, Mama. You will not go anywhere. We need you." Amanda smiled, though her eyes held a depth they did not notice. She kissed the babies' foreheads, then looked at her sons. "I prayed only to see what you would become. God gave me more than I asked. If tomorrow does not come for me, I will still go with a smile." The twins laughed nervously. "Mama, don't talk like that. You're not leaving us." But Amanda only smiled, her hands still rocking the babies. The next morning began with sunlight pouring into the mansion. Jacob and Joshua knocked on Amanda's bedroom door as they always did, carrying trays of breakfast. They had made it a ritual, serving her every morning since she moved in. "Mama," Jacob called. "Open up. We brought your food." Silence. Joshua frowned. He knocked again. "Mama, it's us." Still, no answer. The twins exchanged worried glances. Carefully, they pushed the door open. Inside, Amanda lay on her bed, wrapped neatly in her favorite wrapper. Her hands rested on her chest. Her face carried a peace so deep it almost looked like sleep. But the stillness of her chest told the truth. "Mama!" Jacob shouted, rushing to her side. He shook her gently, then harder. "Mama, please, wake up. It's us, Jacob and Joshua. Don't leave us." Joshua fell to his knees, gripping her hand. It was already cold. His voice cracked as he sobbed. "Mama, you said you would carry our children. They are here. Please, don't go. Please." Their wives, Juliet and Cynthia, hurried in, carrying the babies. The sight of the twins wailing beside the bed sent them into tears as well. The cries of the newborns filled the room, as though the little ones sensed the loss. For a long while, the room echoed with grief. Jacob held her hand to his forehead, whispering prayers. Joshua cried into the sheets. The woman who had once pulled them from under a bridge had now gone, leaving behind a legacy carved into their hearts forever. The funeral was held in her village. Thousands came, neighbors, church members, even those who once mocked her. They all stood in silence as the convoy of SUVs rolled into the dusty compound, carrying her casket draped in white. Jacob and Joshua wore simple black, their eyes swollen from weeping. They refused to let anyone else lower her into the ground. Together, with shaking hands, they held the ropes and guided her to rest. "She gave us life," Jacob said, his voice breaking. "Now we give her peace," Joshua added. "She was mocked, she was hated, but she became our light. Everything we are today is because of her." The villagers wept. Some whispered apologies. Some bowed their heads in shame. All knew they were witnessing the burial of a woman who had lived with little but given much. That night, back in the Lecky mansion, the twins sat quietly in the nursery. The babies slept in their cribs, their soft breaths filling the silence. Joshua looked at Jacob. "She didn't die poor. She didn't die mocked. She died fulfilled." Jacob nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. "We kept our promise, brother. We gave her the life she deserved." They sat in silence, watching the babies. Amanda's words echoed in their hearts. "A house is empty without the sound of children." Now, the house was full not just of children, but of the legacy of a woman who had turned two abandoned boys into kings. And though she was gone, her love would live on in every heartbeat of the family she left behind. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.